They said, Rebbe, what do you see? He says, I see the parchment burns, but the letters rise to heaven. There's a story in the Gemara about a woman named Beruryah. Beruryah was the wife of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was one of the great rabbis of the Tanoic period. Let's say 2nd century around. He was a student of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Meir, famously a student of Rabbi Akiva. He was married to a woman named Beruryah, who herself was the daughter of a very great sage named Rabbi Chananyah ben Tradyon. She was an incredible woman. She was very, very strong, brilliant woman who was perhaps more brilliant than the men of her age, which irritated some people. But she grew up her whole life in the home of her father, a great sage, constantly listening to the discussions of her father and the other great Torah minds of the generation. And she clearly had a very strong memory, and she just absorbed everything. So later on, when her husband would be talking to his rabbi friends and they would be discussing matters of Torah, she would frequently pipe in and say, by the way, you're wrong, you're right, or you're all wrong. This is the correct approach, whatever it was. There are many stories about Beruryah and her strength of character. There's one story where she comes into the Beis Medrash, into the study hall, and she sees there's a student there he's studying quietly, which is against the grain, really. So she walks over to him and she kicks him. And she says, "Fool, don't you want to remember what you learned? Let your ears hear the words of Torah. Don't just look at it. Don't even just whisper it." And that's one level, but your ears should hear. Say it loudly. And she's a wise woman. Maybe she wasn't so diplomatic. But she's, if I could tell you more stories, you'd see how harsh she was some of the time. To some of the great sages, not just to the students. She didn't hold her tongue.
Did she have sisters or brothers?
She had a sister. We're told about her sister because unfortunately her father was one of the 10 martyrs. Heard of the 10 martyrs?
Yeah.
So her father was one of the rabbis who was caught teaching Torah publicly, and he was executed in a very gruesome fashion. It wasn't enough. I mean, the Romans were really the worst. They were the worst. It wasn't enough that they killed Rabbi Chananyah ben Tradyon. I think they also executed his wife. They took his unmarried daughter, her sister, and they put her into a house of ill repute. They forced her into that lifestyle to basically be a slave for whatever Roman would come along and, want to use her. Now, the happy ending to that story is that Rabbi Meir jailbreaks her. Rabbi Meir, Beruryah's husband, breaks her out of jail. Beruryah's father was Rabbi Chananyah ben Tradyon. They wrapped him in the Sefer Torah that he was teaching from. But they didn't print a book, so he taught out of a Torah scroll. They took him and his Torah scroll and they wrapped him in it, and they put wet sponges over his heart, and they lit the Torah on fire, so that he would burn, but he would stay alive. He would stay alive, exactly. So he would suffer as much torment as possible. This is a very difficult story to hear, but it's a very moving story, because the students were hearing a sound when his execution was taking place. They heard the sound of something fluttering in the air, and they could see that the Rabbi Chananyah ben Tradyon was looking up at something, and he seemed transfixed by it, and it seemed to be giving him comfort in his last moments. And they said, "Rebbe, what do you see?" It's very famous. He says, "I see the parchment burns, but the letters rise to heaven." The students say, "Rebbe, breathe in the flames so that you die more quickly." And he says, "I don't have a right to do that. My Creator gave me this life and I don't have a right to take it before he chooses to take it from me. The executioner becomes very moved by the righteousness of this individual, the holiness of Rabbi Chananyah, and he has remorse on the spot for what he's doing. But at this point, it's somewhat irreversible. And he says to Rabbi Chananyah, he says, Rebbe, says the Roman executioner, Rebbe, if I stoke the flames so that you die more quickly and you suffer less, and I remove the sponges from your heart, will I earn a share in the world to come? Listen to this. He says, yes, you will. Yes. So he removes the sponges, and Rabbi Chananyah ben Tradyon passes away, and the executioner jumps into the flames after Rabbi Chananyah then dies. A voice emerged from heaven and said, this executioner is called immediately to the next world, immediately to paradise, basically, to Gan Eden. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, when he heard this, he cried and he said, there are those who spend their entire lives earning a share in the world to come, and there are those who earn it in a single moment. Very, very powerful.
Why did he earn a share in the world to come?
With that one act of compassion, that single act of compassion.
A little too late. No.
And yet not too late. Because with the single act of compassion, of reducing the pain of this holy individual, he did teshuvah. Let's put it that way. It was representative of a transformation that happened within him internally. Now, you could say, if he just said to Rabbi Chananyah ben Tradyon, I regret everything that I'm doing, I'm so remorseful, will God forgive me and bring me to the next world? Would the answer have been yes or no? I don't know. But the way the question was formulated is if I do this act of compassion, will I earn a place in the world to come? The answer was yes. Giving expression to something internal is more powerful than keeping it in. Saying words of Torah and hearing them with our ears has a greater impact on us than just looking at them. Acting with compassion towards Rabbi Chananyah was more transformative than just feeling remorseful. There are those who spend their entire lives earning a share in the world to come, and there are those who earn it in a single moment.